Muted.
Good evening and welcome to this public meeting for development charges. It is Thursday, June the 19th, 6:30 p.m. and I will call this meeting to order. I'll remind members of disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. None noted. We'll move on with section 3 for materials, and we have both sections A and B to the 2025 development charges study and draft bylaw, and section B, development charges public meeting presentation. Byron, I see, is with us this evening from Watson Associates. Between you and Lauren, take us away. Of course, we got Lauren busy, so Byron, you might have to do this.
I'll let you kick it off, Byron.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. So I'm just trying to open up. I'm just having a little bit of a technical difficulty with the presentation here. Just as soon as I open it, I'll be able to share my screen. I apologize about that. All right, perfect. It is now working. Please let me know when you can see my screen. I apologize about the delay.
We can see it.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you very much, Your Worship, members of council, members of the public. As described, this presentation is a mandatory public meeting under the Development Charges Act. So I'll be going through a bit of an overview of the development charge background study, what has transpired to date, as well as really going through the proposed policies, the growth forecast, the rates, and then the next steps. Just as a precursor, we did provide a presentation to council, I believe, last month. So a lot of the information contained herein, would be very similar to what was presented back in May. The only difference is now we have finalized the rates, as well as the policies that are proposed for council's consideration. Now, I would just like to also mention that tonight's presentation, since it is a public meeting, no decisions need to be made. That would be part of council's consideration of the bylaw, which is anticipated for August. However, if there are any other directions or any questions or items that you'd like us to take away with staff, we'll be happy to do so subsequent to this meeting. So with that being said, so in terms of development charges, again, just really a reminder for the public, it is an ability for municipalities to recover for the capital costs associated with residential and non-residential growth within a municipality. The capital costs are in addition to what you would normally require a subdivision to construct on your behalf, namely with respect to internal roads. Perhaps you may require subdivisions and developers to create the sidewalks, street lights, or any other internal works that you would eventually assume once the construction of that subdivision has been completed. Now, development charges are not mandatory. They are allowed by the Development Charges Act via the province for municipalities to pass a bylaw in order to impose development charges. You currently do have development charges right now for your water and wastewater. However, this undertaking will now provide you with development charges for your municipal-wide services. So in terms of the development charge process, how it typically works is we start off at a high level, taking a look at your growth and development, namely your planning documents, official plans, or any other items that would identify the growth within the municipality. Then we take a look at that growth and then layer it on with your master plans, capital forecasts, or any other type of assessments in order to service the growth that is proposed within your development and planning documents. And taking that information further, we then utilize the two pieces and essentially calculate the development charge funding envelope that can be passed through a development charge bylaw via the background study. So just a bit of a relationship between the development charges, servicing new growth, and really your existing tax base. So just looking at the top portion of the triangle here, you may recall that if you are growing, there are growth implications to that, and therefore there may be new infrastructure that's required to service these new users, the new population and employees that will be coming to the municipality. There's no magic to it. Either you impose a development charge in order to assist with funding these growth-related works, or you elect not to have a development charge bylaw. But then, if you do still have to create these, increased capacity of infrastructure, new roads, sidewalks, etc., then really your only recourse for funding would come from your property taxes, user fees, rates, or even your reserves. Now, there are opportunities perhaps for grants, but as I said, in light of not having any grants and you still have to build these pieces of infrastructure, then those are the main sources of revenues that you have to rely on. Unless, of course, you have development charges in order to proceed and assist with those funding of those works. Now, just really for the members of the public, just simply with respect to the methodology of calculating the DC, again, won't go through the gory details, but essentially we do identify the amount, type, and location of growth. And then from there, we identify the servicing needs, as I had mentioned in the prior slide. Within those servicing needs, we then identify the specific capital projects. And that's where, for example, if you were building parks and recreation requirements, your capital may be either a new playground, a new splash pad, maybe a swimming pool. The capital really, informs the servicing, but it's not as stringent in terms of the actual servicing needs that the municipality is trying to provide for new growth. Once we've identified those costs, though, we do have a number of deductions. So as I mentioned, if you do receive any grants or perhaps any subsidies or other contributions from other sources, those need to be deducted from the capital costs. And then we also have to recognize that portions of your capital may benefit the existing community. And where that is the case, those proportionate share of the capital project and its related costs would have to be deducted from the calculations as well. And then we have the amounts in excess of the 15-year historical service standards. So if you recall, we do a 15-year inventory calculation of what the municipality has historically provided. And what you want to provide in the future can be no higher than the average you provided over the last 15 years. So that's something that we'll include as part of the calculations. And then lastly, from one bylaw to the other, if you have been collecting DCs, if there's any DC reserve funds, you must net those from the calculations. And then therefore, once we calculate that amount, we then separate and allocate the cost between residential and non-residential growth, and then divide it by the different growth forecasts in order to calculate your charge. And put simply, we take the cost of infrastructure, dividing it by the growth, and we typically get a charge on the residential side on a per unit basis, whether it's singles, townhouses, apartments, or on the non-residential side on a per square foot or per square meter basis. Just to keep in mind that the calculations that we have provided for include, excuse me, the following that you see here. So we have services related to a highway, fire protection, and parks and recreation. Oops, sorry about that. Sorry, my computer is lagging here. Are you able to see my screen still?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Okay, sorry. So, with the service standard calculations, as I mentioned, this is a historical calculation that needs to be done, and it really only applies to all services except water, wastewater, storm, and transit. In terms of capital, if you recall, we can include a number of capital items within the development charge background study. The only one that can't be included really is parkland as it relates to the acquisition of the land itself. As you have other legislation, namely the Planning Act, to be able to purchase those lands on your behalf. Now, in terms of other capital restrictions, we also cannot pay for any vehicles and equipment with a useful life of less than 7 years. So that is something that we've ensured that did not flow into the calculations, and only significant capital that has that average useful life or longer is what's being included for recovery. Now, in terms of the legislation, not good. I believe I already went through this with the previous workshop. However, keep in mind, again, DCs, they're not new. They have been around in its previous life under what's considered lot levies. But the latest iteration of the Development Charges Act has been revised, by 10 different bills over the last 10 years. And I'll provide you a little bit of just a backgrounder for the recent legislative changes. So I won't go through every single bill, but at least the ones that would have occurred post your water and wastewater development charge background study. So in Bill 23, as you recall, there's a number of exemptions that now must be adhered to. So we have nonprofit housing you can't collect for, or you cannot charge DCs for, additional residential units. If someone were to build 2 additional apartments to a single family home, you can't charge them a DC. Inclusionary zoning, that's really more for the GTA and transit-oriented neighborhoods, so that doesn't really apply for the municipality of BAM. However, we do have the affordable owned and rental units that are now in effect. So if you do have any of those types of units that come, to the municipality, if they meet the criteria threshold, which I'll talk about in a moment, those would be exempt from DCs. And then lastly, with attainable units, that's not in effect yet. So, however, we have written that policy within your bylaw should the province release the regulations of what is considered attainable. Furthermore, there are some rental housing discounts. If you recall, 15 to 25% discounts depending on the number of bedrooms. 1 bedroom receiving that 15%, 2 bedrooms receiving a 20%, and 3 bedrooms or higher receiving a 25% discount. Now, we can't collect for housing anymore as an eligible service. However, that wouldn't have impacted the municipality anyways, because that's typically a single tier or regional or county service. And then as well, just going through the rest of the items here, which are still in effect, we are still allowed to have a maximum interest rate on installment on the rate freeze for site plan and zoning bylaw applications. And we must still allocate the money, 60% of the monies for water, wastewater, and services related to a highway. Now, allocate doesn't mean spend. It just means that as you're receiving money, DC monies, at the beginning of the year, the treasurer will need to earmark 60% of the collections in those 3 categories to the appropriate projects. And the DC bylaw is allowed to be, has a useful life of 10 years. Now, in terms of the definitions for affordable housing, you could see here that Bill 134 added a income qualifier so that it's considered affordable if either the market costs or the rent of the owned or rental unit is 30% or 60th, or it's part of the 60th percentile of the household income. Now, I do have what those thresholds are in a future slide, but essentially what it means is we're no longer looking at just the average purchase or rental price. There's also an income qualifier as well. And then there were some changes to Bill 185, which doesn't affect the municipality, as we are passing this subsequent to the release. So you don't have to worry about the mandatory phase-in removal or the changing of the studies and the process for minor amendments. Those don't apply as part of this bylaw process. Now, there is one additional slide that I am adding here as part of the conversation, And it is the recently passed Bill 17, which received royal assent on June 5th, 2025. And this is the Protect Ontario by Building Faster and Smarter Act. So it does provide a number of changes, which we have included as part of the background study. So you can no longer charge DCs for long-term care homes. Those are now fully exempt. Now, there is the idea of deferral of the DC payments for residential developments at occupancy. However, that's not currently in effect. It was passed as part of the bill. However, we are still waiting for the minister and the regulations and the proclamation of the lieutenant governor in order for this to take into effect. So, although it is a policy that is written, we are still waiting to see when that cash flow impacts will occur. There's also some removal of interest on the legislated installments. So you may know from Bill 23, if you were to have, let's say, institutional or rental developments, they were allowed to pay their DCs over a period of six installments or 5 years, and you were allowed to actually add interest to those installment payments. Well, this piece of change from the legislation now removes your ability to add interest to those installment payments. And then, as I mentioned, there is a portion there are some changes to the residential institutional developments as well, where the Development Charges Act does allow them to pay their DC earlier than what a bylaw requires, without having to enter into a agreement under the Development Charges Act. So this is something that the municipality and the treasurer will have to monitor, because depending on the cash flow, it may be a good situation for you to receive the money earlier. However, there could be some impacts as well, where they may pay a DC perhaps prior to a bylaw update, prior to indexing, which would then reduce the amount that would be payable if they would have paid it at a later date. There was also some changes on the purposes of credits. Again, I'm happy to chat about that with the future with council or the treasurer. But essentially, if you were to enter into any agreements with these developers on perhaps constructing works on your behalf, or any type of funding agreements where they would be allowed credits, they are now allowed to group certain services for the purposes of credits. And it's a bit of a complicated analysis. I'll be happy to answer any questions if there's anything further on that. But the short of this is essentially they're allowed to now grab more than one service for the purpose of constructing, let's say, water mains or roads. They can utilize some of the credits from other services such as parks and recreation, or maybe even fire services if they so choose. And then there's also some changes to the local service policies. However, those are not in effect yet. And that is something that we are monitoring, and we will keep you apprised of what those changes may be. As I said, these will be coming through the regulations, even though it was part of the Development Charge Act amendment. So with respect to your proposed policies as part of the background study, we are obviously maintaining the mandatory DC exemptions and discounts as allowed for by the Development Charges Act. I won't go through all the ones here. I think I've mentioned it through the prior slides. However, just the first three, we do still have to ensure that upper and lower tier governments and school boards are exempt and don't pay a DC. So therefore, if the county were to build a facility within Bayham, they don't pay a DC. Likewise, if a school board, they wouldn't pay your DC as well. If an industrial development were to expand their square footage, they may expand up to 50% without having to pay a DC. Now, that is only a one-time exemption. We do draw the line in the sand so that this does not get abused. And, every year they come up with a new building permit application to expand by 50%, going from 100 to 150, and then 150 to 225,000 square feet, et cetera, et cetera. So it is one time. And then lastly, with the development of lands, if you did have any university lands, any developments on those lands would be exempt from DCs. And I already mentioned all the other bullets that are on this page. Now, keep in mind with respect to the discretionary exemptions, You are allowed as a council to add any additional exemptions to the mandatory ones that you deem appropriate. You may reduce the charge in whole or in part, whether it's by, a type of a development, so maybe perhaps churches or places of worship, or maybe a class of development such as industrial. You may also phase in the charge over time. So for some instances where the charge may be going to an amount that's a significant increase, you may elect to, stage it so that maybe you're only implementing 50% or 75% and then increase it over the life of the bylaw. Now, keep in mind any exemptions that you do provide will have to be funded from other sources, such as property taxes, water, wastewater rates, other reserves, etc. Because keep in mind, when we calculate the DCs, the assumption is what you're collecting is to pay for the full capital program that's DC eligible. So by electing to discount any of the DC portions, you still have a commitment to, say, construct a facility, but you're not collecting the amount that should have been attributed to those capital projects. So that's just one comment that I'd like to make there. And then lastly, we also have redevelopment credits. And what these are, they're not necessarily having to be funded through other sources, so it's not an exemption by a traditional exemption. However, what this means is, knock on wood, if my house were to burn down, I should be allowed a period of time to rebuild it without having to pay a DC, perhaps 5 years. Likewise, if maybe I wanted to tear my house down and build 3 townhouses, then the single family home charge, so let's assume it's a $10,000 charge, and then I want to build 3 townhouses at $5,000 each on a DC, then my payable would be $15,000 minus the house I just demolished, which would have had a $10,000 DC. So my net payable to the municipality would be $5,000. And that works both ways with residential to non-res, non-res to res, or res to res, non-res to non-res. Now, within the background study and through conversations with with the municipality, we have included these 4 discretionary exemptions for your consideration as part of the bylaw in August. We do have places of worship, bona fide farms, cemeteries, and hospitals. Now, as I mentioned, within the municipality, there is that affordable criteria, which would be deemed non-DC eligible, DC exempt. So in the right-hand side, you could see there where it is considered affordable if the home, whether it's a single-family townhouse or apartment, it must be sold at less than $355,700. If it's less than that amount, then it is considered affordable. Under the under the province of Ontario's Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing Bulletin. And then likewise with the rentals, it must be less than, $1,013 for a studio bachelor apartment, all the way up to $1,665 for a 3+ bedroom apartment. I did mention about the local service policy. As part of the background study, we're also providing you a policy document that really outlines what would be the type of projects and capital eligibility that would be included in the development charge background study and for recovery, as opposed to those that would be more of a local service that you would require a developer to be building and constructing on your behalf, which is more localized to their subdivision. So we do have that as part of Appendix E to your background study, and that lays the foundation as to how we determine which project goes into the background study. Now, in terms of the draft growth forecasts, so what we are providing here from the background study is a 10-year and a longer-term forecast. You could see over the longer term going out to 2051, we are anticipating just over 650 new residential units coming to the municipality. And that translates to just under 1,340 population increase. Now, similarly, on the non-residential side, we are anticipating roughly just over 258,000 square feet of non-residential, building. Now, keep in mind, you are undertaking some updates to your water and wastewater with respect to capacity, which may potentially change your growth forecast to 2051. And if there are any major changes that occur over the next few years, it'll be easy enough to update the background study to be able to pivot and revise the population numbers as well as the related capital, should that, should your circumstance change over time. So with that being said, the draft, or sorry, not the draft, but the calculated development charge rates are presented on the screen for council's consideration. As you can see, for a single family home, a single or semi-detached dwelling, the calculated charge is $11,403, with the majority of it coming from services related to a highway, which is your roads, bridges, public works, fleet, vehicles, equipment, etc. As we go down from left to right, you can see townhouses or multiples. That's the next largest charge, 7,364. And then we have your apartments, whether large or small, anywhere between $3,452 to $5,868. We also have a charge for what's considered special care, special dwelling. So what this means is if you ever have a development that's perhaps a like a retirement home, typically we would charge more so on a per bed or per bedroom basis. In which case you could see that's roughly just about one person per unit. So hence it reflects the smallest charge at $3,295. And then lastly, with non-residential, we do have one singular charge for industrial, commercial, institutional, and that's $4.82 per square foot. Now, lastly, how do you compare with other municipalities? You can see here right now that we do have the lower tier charges, which is inclusive of your water and wastewater. So that water and wastewater is represented in the green, whereas the other ones again they're all is an all-in charge as well, which includes water, wastewater should they have it. So as you can see, you do have various charges depending on what area you belong to within the town, within the municipality. However, keep in mind the purpose of today's public meeting is really dealing with the blue charges, which is the municipal wide, which is that $11,000 amount. And I would like to note that a few of these municipalities, they are undertaking an update to their development charge background study. So you can see there we have Southwest Middlesex, West Elgin, and actually Central Elgin as well is now undertaking an update. And I believe there's another one as well that will be updating their DCs over time. And I believe their new DCs should be coming out at the turn of next year, if not by Q2 of 2026. In terms of the commercial, you can see here that you're right in the middle of the pack, with Strathroy Caradoc still being on the far left, and then Central Elgin, Almer, and then yourselves at the calculated rate, and then we have Malahide, Southwold, and then the other three municipalities currently do not charge on the commercial non-residential side. And then in terms of the industrial, very similar to the commercial, you're right in the middle in terms of the ranking. So with Strathroy, Caradoc, Central Elgin, Almer, and Dunwich above your calculated charge at the moment. So with that being said, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or open it up for council and the public to make any comments. However, I'd just like to point out that again, any conversations or any directions from council subsequent to the meeting could still be adjusted as part of the prior to the council's consideration of the bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much, Byron. Lauren, do you have anything to add?
The only thing I was going to add, your worship, just to relate to council, back in May, I presented TR 1225. That was one of council's requests at how we compared to Malahide. Just to remind council, on a single house, we're $500 more. On other, we are $1,300 less. On an apartment, we're $800 less. On a bachelor, we're $800 less. On a special care, we're $300 less. And we are 84 cents a square foot more than Malahide for other. So if you work the average, we're pretty well A comparable.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's move on then with the public participation portion of the meeting. If anyone is present in the gallery that wants to ask a question or have a comment, this is your time. Just invite you to the podium. Anyone? Okay. Would note that there is no correspondence or other business, which will bring us to the adjournment portion. Byron, again, thank you very much for leading us through the presentation, and Lauren for your comments as well. And we look forward to, and Byron, just to clarify on your last comment, you or Lauren will be accepting comments up until the adoption of the bylaw in August?
Through your worship, it'd really be more so for the policy items such as the discretionary exemptions.
Right.
Because those items are for your consideration. But other than that, if there's any structural changes to the bylaw, I'm happy to work with Lauren and staff. But that was really it's more for the bylaw piece.
Thank you. That's what I was just trying to clarify. All right, good. Council, you're going to have your chance in August to go through this again. All right. So again, that concludes the public meeting. We have a motion that reads, the public meeting held under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act be adjourned at 7:01 p.m. I need a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Emerson and Councillor Froese will second. All in favor? That is carried. This meeting is adjourned. Again, Byron, thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you, worship. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Good evening and welcome to our regular session of council for the municipality of Bayham. It is Thursday, June the 19th, 2025, 7:02 p.m. and I will call this meeting to order. I'll remind members of any disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Councillor Emerson.
Mr. Mayor, 12-2.
12.2. Okay, so noted.
D, 12.2.
12.2D. Thank you. Moving on to section 3, review of items not listed on the agenda. Thomas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have an addition and a removal. So the addition is item 13.1.2A, correspondence from Warden Grant Jones, County of Elgin, and Mayor Joe Preston, City of St. Thomas, regarding community safety and well-being plan review and update. And the removal is item 12.2A, that is the supplementary height report from the planning coordinator and the fire chief pending additional legal input. So that will come back at a later date.
All right, thank you for that. Moving on with section 4 for announcements. Does any member of council have any announcements for this evening? Pretty quiet bunch. Okay, I will announce that last night I had the privilege of attending the Elgin Middlesex Regional Fire School graduation. And I'm very pleased to support and announce 3 of Bayham's recruits graduated last evening. That is Joshua Harder, I believe that's from Station 1, Jeffrey Mullen, and Kyan Rogers, both from Station 2. So very pleased to have these recruits beginning their careers. They're not, they've got a long way to go, but they're beginning their careers and they're off on the right foot, and we welcome them to Bayham and are grateful to have them. So congratulations to them. If there are no other announcements, we will move on then with section 6, delegations. This evening we have Barry Wade, who wishes to make some comments regarding residential building height. You got it. I got it. And we have an official timekeeper. Thomas, so hopefully you've got it programmed for 10 minutes. You'll admit Barry, please. Okay, Barry, welcome. You've got 10 minutes for your delegation.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Catchball, council, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening regarding staff report DS 1925, which addresses the maximum building height regulations. I would like to thank Fire Chief Barnick for his ongoing commitment to public safety in our community. While I appreciate his efforts, I find the recommendations in this report both unusual and troubling, given the current legislative and regulatory framework in Ontario. Today, I would like to speak to the following 6 topics, one being the brief history of how we got here, understanding building heights, fire risk within the current regulatory framework. Then I'll discuss housing affordability, followed by my request to action to council. In October 22, council adopted a 7-meter height restriction for village residential zones as part of the housekeeping amendment to address limitations in BAM's fire response capabilities. No technical rationale or detailed justification was ever provided. Since then, 9 variance applications have been submitted by residents seeking relief from the 7-meter height restrictions. Although not a single application was denied, the resulted in unnecessary delays of over $18,000 in fees paid by the residents. That's $18,000 in unnecessary red tape and not one documented case where the 7-meter limit actually improves public safety. So let's be clear, this restriction has not made BAM safer. It has made it slower, more expensive, and increasingly out of touch with provincial housing goals. So let's talk about building heights. Building heights is measured from the average grade to the midpoint of a roof. To give council a sense of scale, a 1-story home typically comes in about 3.5 meters. A 2-story home is 7 meters. A 3-story home is 10 meters. These figures vary depending on design features like higher ceilings, walkouts, and roof pitches. So even a modest 2-story home can exceed 7 meters in height, meaning this bylaw restricts common functional residential forms. Zoning needs to accommodate modern design trends, family needs, accessibility, and sloping lots. It must be flexible enough to allow for reasonable diversity in form and function. Even the province acknowledges this. Bill 17 has introduced an as of right 10% variance relief to cut red tape and avoid unnecessary variance applications. In a pre-consultation meeting for the townhouse development, the fire chief was asked if he could respond to a fire in a typical 10-meter, 3-story home. His answer was, yes, I can, and that's on record. Modern construction does pose new risk, such as rapid collapse from lightweight trusses, but fire departments across Ontario manage these risks through training, defensive tactics, and safe window access, and not through rooftop entry. Most 2nd and 3rd floor story windows are 3.9 to 6.7 meters above grade. BAM's ladders extend 7.3 and 10 meters, as confirmed by the fire chief in his report. This is more than adequate to serve these heights safely and effectively. Let's put this into clear regulatory context. The fire chief does not have the authority to create or enforce planning policies, zoning regulations, or construction standards. His role is advisory to inform council about public safety, operational capacity based on the fire department's resources and response capabilities. In Ontario, construction standards, including sprinkler systems, emergency access, and structural fire safety, are governed solely by the Ontario Building Code. These are uniform across the province and enforced by the chief building official, not the fire chief. Planning matters such as zoning bylaw amendments or land use designs fall under council's authority, typically supported by licensed planners, not fire services. While a fire chief can and should provide input on fire risk, that advice must respect the limits of provincial law. When a fire chief co-authors or drives a planning policy, especially without a registered planner involved, it crosses into a territory outside both professional scope and legal jurisdiction. That brings us to Bill 17, the Protect Ontario by a Builder Faster and Smarter Act, which received royal assent on June the 5th, 2025. It amended the Ontario Building Code to include sections 35, 1.1, which makes this crystal clear. Municipalities, and by extension of their staff, cannot create or enforce their own construction requirements or standards. This includes attaching them to zoning bylaws or minor variance approvals. Yet, let's take a look at option 3 in the report before you. BAM is doing exactly that, and doing so through a report co-authored by the fire chief and the planning coordinator, neither of whom are legally authorized to set construction or zoning standards. Option 3 proposes to require sprinkler systems for homes over 7 meters, mandate year-round exterior access for firefighters, demand NFPA certified inspections, involve fire department review of building designs and materials. None of these are required by the Ontario Building Code for single-family dwellings, and under Bill 17, municipalities cannot enforce these requirements, not even as optional conditions tied to variances. These are not zoning matters. They are building design and performance standards. And under Bill 17, they fall exclusively under the Ontario Building Code. Zoning cannot be used to impose construction standards. Doing so exceeds BAM's legal authority. Finally, it's worth noting that the chief building official who holds sole authority to interpret any and apply the building code is entirely absent from this report. That alone should raise serious concerns about the professional viability and legal integrity of the recommendations being put forth before council tonight. Now let's discuss housing affordability and real impact of imposing a 7-meter height limitation. BAM's 7-meter restriction is unprecedented in Elgin County. Nearby municipalities, Elmer, Central Elgin, Malahide, allow 10.5 meters or more in similar zones, as does Oxford and Norfolk counties. This puts BAM at a competitive disadvantage for new housing. It drives up construction costs by forcing custom designs and expensive variances. It causes approval delays contrary to the province's directive to speed up housing. It sends a message to builders and residents, go elsewhere. The province has made it clear, Bill 23, Bill 109, and Bill 17. Municipalities must do their part to remove obstacles to housing. BAM's outdated bylaw creates obstacles, not solutions. So let's quickly look at the 4 options staff has brought forward to council tonight. Option 1, keep the status quo. More red tape, more fees, more frustration. Option 3 proposes enforcing illegal construction standards through zoning. Option 4 recommends purchasing an aerial pumper truck, $1 million solution to a problem that does not exist. Option 2 appears to be the only option that respects the law, public need, and sound planning. So why option 2 is the right choice? It aligns with the Ontario Building Code, Bill 17. It supports diversity and flexibility in housing design. It reduces delays and costs for builders and homeowners. It restores fairness and consistency across BAM's residential zones. It aligns with zoning standards in Elgin, Oxford, and Norfolk counties. On a final note, this is not a technical zoning issue. This is a case of flawed regulation that burden homeowners financially, distorted development decisions, and puts BAM at a step with the rest of the region. Council now has a chance to fix by restoring fairness, legality, and common sense. I respectfully request that Council adopt option 2, the amended zoning bylaw number Z4562003, section 10.5 and 11.6 to increase the maximum building height for village residential R1 and R2 zones to 10.5 meters, consistent with the rest of BAM and the region. Thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions from council or staff.
All right, thank you very much for your comments, Barry. As you know, that report has been deferred till July meeting, of which we can verify some of the legalities of the particular options being presented. But thank you for your comments. We have
Thank
a
you.
motion that reads that the delegation from Barry Wade regarding residential building height be received for information. Do I have a mover and second? Councillor Emerson? Councillor Froese will second. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Yes.
We're just going to pause for one moment. We're having some issues with our video. One moment.